Moizem Mishnah Brure. The Mishnah Brure says, "Shegam Ladas Hamakilim," that those who are makel to say that Ba'oimed al Gabav, if the Jew is overlooking it and he's saying the Shematis mitzvahs, it's not enough to say it one time before the baking, but so he has to tell them all the time. They shouldn't for a moment forget that he's doing it for matzah. And he explains further, as if gotten Dalit, that a cheresh hakavona she'enu shemei aveinu min habil. When it says cheresh, it means somebody who cannot hear or speak. Because somebody who speaks is a cheresh. It's not. That's not a din of cheresh. He is considered a normal person. In other words, later somebody became deaf in his later years. He speaks. He's fine. And this is cotton. Is somebody who didn't become 13 years old in one day. A woman, it's 5-year-olds. A shaita is somebody who cannot keep that which he's given. Today, many people are lenient, and they let it cut, and he writes this in his time, or Tano, to give water into the kemach. It's not correct, even though it would seemingly be something which is not a very big action. What do they have to do? But the answer is, they have to be part of Lisha, has to be the Shematis mitzvah. But taking it from the table on the rolling boards to the place where they make the holes in it, that would be okay because then they're not doing anything. That's what we usually use. The children have them do a part of it. We do some matzah. So, Machon says the Rosh was mishtal matzah's mitzvah, and he would stand there the entire time. He would tell everybody that's working there that Shem matzah's mitzvah, and that's right for every person to be. He should have a part in the mitzvah, which the Ruah brings down. The Rav Haskins, you should be careful at Chilo to do the entire mitzvah. And so the Pri Chodesh writes, there are many instances where you have to make decisions. And the Mishnah brings down, the Rae Kodesh says that the sweat that one has in the mitzvah is taking godel for the very worst of sins. The Beis Yosef, the Levush, explain the question of the Magen Mishnah, why the Rambam and the Rif left out that a person can eat a whole Pesach, the doughs of Goyim, because both of them are of the opinion, like Rabbeinu Hananel, that it's talking about an area where he did it in front of Israel, and he sees there's no Chometz in it, and it becomes Chometz. Just it's not the same mitzvah. So there's no Chiddush. Matzah's mitzvah is for the kazayas that you need Leil Pesach. The whole Pesach, as long as it's not Chometz, it's fine. Just like any other product. If it's not Chometz, you can eat it. But how do you know? That's how we have Mashgichim. The Eliyahu Rebbe brings down many of the opinion like Rashi, that even if the Yisrael did not see that the Goy cooked it, since he sees there's no chimutz in it, you don't have to worry about it. Like the Bach. So it seems Shimo is only Rabbanan. Also, the Chag Yaakov feels that opinion. And when it says Shematim Matzah is an asmachto, is a reliance of Midrabanan. The Rav Chodesh says it's Midaraisa. And also, we have to realize that today with machine matzahs, for sure they don't clean it in between. So why do you have to worry about that? Even if somebody makes it in the same pan, they continue to make chometz. You can rely on it because it's being continuously worked. I'm not sure exactly why why you can't tell whether it's chometz would be enough. Rae Yaakov brings proof. It's not deraisa for the Rambam's statement that wheat that did not crack open, it's also the Rabbanon, and he quotes the posuk of Shematim Hamatzos. So therefore, she doesn't bring the posuk as a definitive, but rather for the Rabbanon. But the Pri Megadim says the Rambam wrote it only regarding wheat that's not cracked open. Now, it's not also because it's not chometz. Chazal made it also because they want shimur gomer. But she was a Rashba, Lavush, it would seem that it's Midaraisa, you can't use this wheat. To be Halacha, there's a raya from the Rambam, Chalois Toida, or Kike Noza. We find in the Gemara that if a person made, when you bring a Korban Toida, you have to bring with it certain matzahs. Or Kike Noza also needs is a matzah. That a person made it for himself, but not the same matzah's mitzvah. You're not Yotzeba with them for the light of night of Pesach. This is Shmatim Hamatzis. It doesn't mention over there that's been Rabbona. It would seem to infer that it's the Raisa. And furthermore, the Peirush HaMeir that you're not Yotze on Pesach, even though it's Matzah Gemurah, because Hashem Yisrael said Shmatim Hamatzis. We have a Kabbalah that's watched L'Shem Matzah. This is to exclude this one. It's not mishtaber l'shem matzah, and l'shem zevach for an offering. Else we see that the Rosh you need shimur l'shem matzah is the Yeraisa. Go to the next page. So the Bia Halacha says, even though that many Rishonim are not of this opinion, Halacha from Lisha, from mixing the water until after it's baked, in the Torah, we say it's a likuva, even b'di'evet. But from harvesting till the point of flour is only midrabanan. Furthermore, the Bialoga says a cotton. Okay, he's 13 years old in one day. We don't know if he's really an adult because adulthood is dependent also on the factor of having hairs growing already that would not grow as a child. You rely on the chazaka because most children that attain the age of 13 years in one day have 2 years, or a female of 12 years in one day. But we rely on the Rabbonans. That's the chazaka. But when we got to the rice, we don't rely on it, and therefore one should not permit a cotton or a tana, even though they went through the bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, even putting in water to kemach, to the flour, because until we know for sure that they have achieved maturity in physical growth, because that's, according to many Rishonim, is their rice. Now, Vayiro B'dogen Shetova Menor. Learning Periyei Halacha Ches and Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. Tavshil, a cooked item that was cooked, you find within it whole kernels of barley, rechitim, or wheat. Imnit batku, if these kernels became split, in other words, they cracked open, also. Let's look down below. The entire thing is forbidden, chometz, because chometz came into it. And loinis baku, if they didn't become chometz, mitian oison, v'soyafon. You take it out and you burn it, and you don't eat it, and you eat the rest of the cooked item. She'ein adogen nivlal, because wheat that was mixed in water or in this cooked this mixture of food, because if it didn't split open, it's not called chometz gomer min haTorah. That you can't eat wheat or barley that was placed in water or cooked in it if they did not split open. We're learning Perek Halacha Tes Mishum Shenema, because it says the Shemois Shmatim is Hamatzis. So let's look at the Peirush, what it says down below here. Shmatim is Hamatzis. Kloima, be careful with matzah and watch it be called tzad chimutz, from any type of chometz. Shouldn't become fermented. Shmaltem, this is which called shmura matzah, watched matzah. And this is where we're going to explain the isur in wheat that was soaked and didn't didn't crack open. And also matzah, which is made by a goy or a deaf mute or a shlit or a cotton, when it might be possibly be okay. Now, the Rambam came here to explain that Chachamim learned from this pasuk that wheat or barley that were in water or cooked in water, soaked or cooked, even though they didn't break open, they're forbidden. But it's only Rabbanan. It's a rabbinical concept, and therefore, if they were cooked in if they fell into something which is being cooked, they don't forbid the cooked item. The Magen Mishnah cites the Rif on the Gemara Psochim. Ein loisesin is a so'erim b'Pesach, which we had earlier, that you don't soak it in water to get off the husks. And only if they crack open are they forbidden if they did so. Doesn't mean they cracked open, but even if they're soft enough, by barley that we said that they will crack when they're placed on top of slight heat. The Rif and the Rambam explain that it means these tiles that upon them you cook or bake barley, and Mar Ukva says they consider Chometz, and Shmuel doesn't. It disagrees that only when they crack open they're forbidden. The Rif, as we learned earlier, paskins that you should not use it like Mar Ukva, not to eat it. The Rambam doesn't make a difference between wheat and barley here. He says by both of them, if they crack, they're forbidden, and they forbid that which they found within the food item that they were cooked with, because they're chometz gama d'oraisa. If they didn't crack open, they're forbidden, they themselves, because you can't eat them. The Magen Mishnah adds, if they're in the food item and they did not crack open, since the whole issue of tarubus chometz v'mashu is midrabanan, they didn't forbid. It does not forbid the tafshil, because it might not be something that's forbidden. Only if it cracked, we say it's definitely chometz. And he cites further, only by barley, if they didn't crack, they don't forbid the tafshil. But wheat, even if they didn't crack, it forbids it, and they forbid the tafshil. This concept is explained by the Gos Maimonides. I found the name of Riva. We codify the halacha according to Shmuel. That it says it has to be cracked. That's only by barley. Then there's a chash, but chitin or shifon or shiboilis, that they're a type of soyim as well. Even if they didn't crack, if they a lot of time in water, they're forbidden because of a new thought that the wheat, which is hard, even they'll stay a whole day, they won't crack. And therefore, if we'll wait till they crack, they will never find them also. Therefore, the Rivah is machmir, and it says that the fact that we said earlier that Sa'urim, cracking by Sa'urim, and the only difference would be by Sa'urim you can tell by the crack, and not by chitim. If you find chitim in a bird that you cooked, because Tarnagolis eat wheat, grain items, and when you cook them on Pesach, it could be that you'll find within them chitim. If they didn't crack, they forbid the tafshil. But Sa'urim that it ate, if they didn't crack, they don't forbid it. He cites the Rambam, chitim and Sa'urim is the same. If you find them in the tafshil, they're cracked. Not like the Rivah. But there are those who say that chitim, even if they didn't crack, they're forbidden. So Rabbeinu Manoach says the halacha is like the Rambam, and that's what the Ravid agrees as well. The Baal HaTosfos says that you shouldn't make a difference between chitim and soirim. If you find them complete and they didn't crack, they don't forbid the tafshil. He adds furthermore that this was din is only stated when it's found in the tafshil one grain. If it's cracked, it's forbidden. Because Chometz Pesach is also a mashu. But by a bird, they slaughtered it and they salted it, and they found Chometz, even though it's not cooked. Since it's not cooked yet, even if it became cracked, and it has become chometz, only that place, and the bird has to be thrown out, and you cut around it because it's not cooked yet. It's hard. But he says you have to check if it's only one chita, whether it's chita or isoirin in the food item. If somebody ate it, he didn't find it till after he ate the item. If it's also to use that pot that was cooked in without agola. He says there are those who aser chametz bezach isur b'mashu, and then chametz b'mashu is like tois and tam b'shar yisurim. Therefore, you can't use those plates or without agola. Now, why would agola work? In the Gedera, if it's of cheres, you'll have to leave it till after Pesach because chametz, it's also mashu. Like every issa is also b'nois and tam. There are those who say that only Rabbanon is chametz also mashu, but not Torah. Therefore, we just say that the food item is also, but not the pot. Even they took it out when it was hot, and it's mutter to use them again without hagolah. There, certainly, the plates that you put things on which are not that hot to begin with, that you can use them. The Rabbi Manoach concludes, I think those who say it's oisa, also have more logic to them than those who say it's mutter. And the Agodas Maimon says the same thing as well. If you find a grain of wheat, a kernel of wheat, inside a cooked item, it forbids it b'mashu. And the kli, I had the tafshel and the spoon and the cover, all of these are also on Pesach. Halacha l'maisa, Shulchan Aruch paskins. A tafshel that was cooked, and you find so'irim or chitim, if it cracked, the entire tafshel is osur. If it didn't crack, the tafshel is mutter. The entire cooked item is forbidden. If it didn't crack, the tafshel is mutter. But the wheat or the barley, then you burn them up. You can't use them. The Rambam says that's not the minhag. You say everything's also, even if it didn't crack. Mishnah Berurah explains there's a machlokes whether if you soak barley in water. Shmuel says it's not called chometz until it cracks. And Malka says that even if it begins to swell, even before it cracks open, it's also forbidden. The Shulchan Aruch is machmir, not to eat it like the rif, but regarding the cooked item that you find the grains in them, it's only also mashu d'Rabbanan your makel until you know for sure that it became chometz, it cracked. And what the Mechaber says, the tafshel is also imachitim, vayasoirin isbaku. Mishnah Berurah says it's also afilu bano. Also the vessels. So if it cracks, he's machmer. According to the Ramah, everything is also b'mashu. Mishnah Berurah explains that means not only the cooked item, but also the vessels. And the Taz is that the tafshel is also even bano. And there are some achronim that say that if there's a great loss, you can allow a person to have ano, because since it's Rabbanon, it's mashu is the Rabbanon, and secondly, because you don't know if there was really chometz here, therefore it's a suffix whether there was a mashu. Furthermore, the Shulchan Aruch says a tarnagolis that's cooked. You find in Pesach a chito, a grain that was cracked open. You can sell it to a goy because this kernel you're not benefiting from, and again, the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to use it. Have ano. The Ramah says, but we in our areas, in our countries, we burn it all, and everything that you find the chita in it. Here too, the Mishnah Berurah says in the name of Achronim, if there's a great loss, that you can be makel. And this has to be according to the judgment of a posek who can say what is called great loss. The Mechaber continues,
the 8th day of Pesach, which is only a Rabbanan as well. There you can leave it till after Pesach, because today is Yisofik Yom Tosofik Chol, Ta'uz Mashu is also only with Rabbanan, and here we don't even know if we have a Mashu, therefore you can leave it till after Pesach, and then it's Mutter even by Achila Lekuli Alma. Lefikoch, Kimi Shalom Dem Raposik, Ushmatem es Hamatzes. You learn from Ushmatem es Hamatzes that you have to watch it. Ziru b'matzo shimura mikol shimrua mikol tzad chimutz. Therefore, Amar Chachomim said to Aaron Lizor b'dogon. A person has to be careful with the grain. Sho'echom mimenu b'Pesach. They eat from it on Pesach. Shlo all of mayim acha sheniktzah at shlo shum chimutz. That water came on it after it was harvested. It shouldn't have any chometz. Dogon is any of the 5 different types of grain. As we said, wheat and the family of wheats, barley and spelt and rye. All these you can make matzah because it's watched from that point. But you have to be careful that water should not come onto the wheat which was harvested. In fact, today we're machmir that even on the field it shouldn't get wet. The Maggid Mishnah cites Psochim 48. Amar Rova, those who turn over the wheat in the field and they make piles of them. When you do it, you should have it l'shem matzah. You should do it l'shem mitzvahs matzah. That's why we say l'shem matzahs mitzvah. The Maggid Mishnah says we don't find a difference between matzah as the first night and the matzah you eat the rest of Pesach. So technically it all has to be watched. And he brings that the Rif writes that if he only has a kazayas matzah from chito, from wheat that was watched from the time it was cut, that the cutting was already watched, he should use that for the first night. That way, for sure, you have fulfilled the obligation of watching it. So writes the Rambam, someone who doesn't have matzah that's mishuma from mishas ktsira, only a kezayis, when he finishes his suda from the matzah that's not mishuma, he makes on the brocha and he eats a kezayis to biyoitza the chayva of matzah. And he doesn't eat anything afterward. According to the Rambam, he makes a brocha on the kezayis ha'achroin, that on the last kezayis. Thus we see that the Riv and the Rambam that shimur is only something special at the time that you're eating a kezayis, which is for the mitzvah of the night. Just l'chatchila, you should be careful that the dogen that he eats all of Pesach should be shomo. It's not makiv. And you have to say, since the Riv doesn't mention it in the sugya, any difference between the matzah that you eat the first night, what you read the rest of Pesach, and the Rambam doesn't mention any difference. It must be that the Rambam is like the Riv. The lachatchila, you should use the best shmur matzah for the first night, mishas ktsira, which means from the time of harvest and not from the time of flour alone. Because we learned before that flour, they got wet, what to do with it, but that's only ever to use that. So the Maggid Mishnah has a question. Why didn't the Rav and the Rambam write what we find in the Gemara? Shebetzekum shel goyim, that was cooked matzah, is kshera, and you can eat it all, also the night of Pesach. But as long as he eats a matzah of shmur at the end, the last one, or the first one, why they didn't do it, he says he doesn't know. The Maggid Mishnah goes that the meaning of Poshet is, it's well known, that we watch the wheat from the time of harvesting, the matzah of mitzvah. Because the Pesach we eat from a pas that when the water was mixed. Now there are many commentaries that you take matzah shmur mishat ksira to do the obligation of matzah is only mitzvah and amuvcha. It's not that to say that the others are not kosher. And not like the Maggid Mishnah who wants to infer from the Rambam and the Riv So that's the way to do it. If you're not doing it, you're doing one level less. Because we hold halacha, as long as it's watched from before it was mixed with water. You can buy wheat and watch them for Pesach and make from them a dough, and from that point on and watch it. The hiddur is to get chitim that were even as they were cut. Today they have, even if you go out on the farms, they have something that measures the dryness of the wheat. And I once even was present when the farmer was chewing it to see if it reached the right degree of harvest, and they were trying the machine to see which one. When it was a day that they knew it would dry completely, and I think the farmer won. The Maggid Mishnah says you should know a matzah mitzvah if you made it out of if a goy made dough or cheresh shayt of a cotton, even if others watch them and they should watch it, they should do the same mitzvah. You're not yotze choyve. You're not out. You cannot use that matzah for matzah. And so the Rashba says in his chuvas. The Agoras Maimonides says, from here Rashi writes that Yisrael has to be by the chitim to watch them at the time of grinding. Not like the Maggid Mishnah, who says you need shmira mishas ktsiro and mishas lisha. That you need ktsiro from the time, watching it from the time of harvest or from the time of mixing, but rather even from the time of grinding them. In Mikol Malkim, that's only by the matzah's mitzvah. But the rest of Pesach, for sure, if you have nothing else, you can eat them. Habein Manoyach is of the opinion that Divrei Rambam, that it says you should be careful that no water should come on the wheat after it's harvested, is only L'chatchila. But when he doesn't have dogon, which is watched from the time of harvesting, he's Yoitzi Dechevosoi, with what's brought. He can buy in the marketplace flour, and therefore he should watch it only mishas lisha, and he'll fulfill his obligation with the stipulation that he should watch it carefully in its taste and the way it looks and with its smell, that there shouldn't be any chometz. And if he finds that it's hard, it's dry, and good looking, you can eat it on Pesach. You're not choishish that water came and it dried out afterwards. Because you don't say that you don't insert Issa where you don't know that it was there in the first place. Rae Gann says, Hilchos Chametz in the first night, which is chayva, every person who is somebody who wants to elevate his soul should go try to get wheat which was watched from the time of cutting. Therefore, the obligation of matzah shemur is only that for ilahidru. I'll never should be machmeh for the matzah that he needs for the night of Pesach. Now we're going to discuss whether something that's attached to the ground while it's growing can become chometz. So he adds, even when it's attached, it can come to chometz if the tvua is already ripe, and therefore it's no longer attached to the ground. And therefore, when the rain falls on it, if it rains at that time, the wheat technically becomes chometz even while it's attached to the ground, meaning you haven't separated it, even though it's no longer nourishing itself from the ground. He brings a raya from Psachim 33a. There's tumah that's chometz, and there was never roi lamatzah, that it was mechmitza b'mechuba. So you see that achito can become the chometz even when it's in mechuba. Also in the Rif, it says you have to take dogon, which is watched from when you cut it. You can explain it. It's talking about from the time that it had to be cut, even though you didn't cut it. The Rambam writes only from afterwards cut, which would seem that you don't have to watch it while it's still attached to the ground. So Meir Manoach says it doesn't mean that mechuba wouldn't become chometz, because you see from the Gemara that it does become, but it's very rare, especially in Eretz Yisrael where it doesn't rain at that time. Therefore, the Rambam didn't mention it. Another reason is that a person is not careful with something that's not in his rishus, and these wheats don't grow by him. Only when they're cut, he can wash them. Well, he can't wash somebody else's field, especially today in our times. And certainly, if it became chometz or cracked, if the kernels are cracked, it shows that it rained after they became ripe. And the true, if he sees that, it's also because it's tolush. If rain fell on it, he brings further to prove some shas that true wheat, which the time came to cut it and you didn't do it, it's as if it was cut already, because it became kabel tumah, and you can't swear about, if somebody's arguing it's his and you have to swear because there's one aid, you sold it. So you can swear on wheat which is finished because it's no longer considered mechuba. Therefore, it would become chometz even if it's on the ground. Now, what happens if it rained Erev Pesach until that nobody can use the grinding mill because everything's too wet, and he has flour which he bought from the marketplace, which is better, and we say the flour is technically kosher for matzah because you haven't mixed it with water yet. You shouldn't do that because it says ushmatem is amatzos. Now Rambam says in Halacha Tez, be careful from every tzad that it could come to chometz. Therefore, if you didn't watch it from the time of harvest, that's not preferable, but doesn't say you can't use it. But if you didn't watch it from the time of mixing, then you cannot be yoitz. Halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that chitim, wheat, you make from matzah's mitzvah, you should need a shmir yasera, shem matzah's mitzvah. It's not enough that you don't have to worry about the fact it's flour. Why should I worry it's chometz? The Mishnah Berurah says, so that's the mitzvah matzahs to eat the two nights. In Chutz La'aretz they have 2 days of Yom Tov by both seders. You have to eat one kizayis at least of this matzah to be mekayim. Ushmartem is hamatzos. You should watch the matzahs. It has to be from the time of mixing at least. The Mishnah Berurah says, when they're still attached to the ground, you don't have to worry, even if you know that rain came on it. And he brings that we find is that if it's completely finished, and he doesn't need the ground anymore, then it will become chometz. Therefore, the minhag is to cut it when it's still a bit wet before it dries 100%. And loshen ha'machama, to watch it means from the time of cutting is only a hidur, a special embellishment of the mitzvah, but it does not preclude one from using flour. The Halacha cites the Chodesh decides that Shimo is actually mishas ktsira, from harvesting its medin, even b'di'evet. We find a few Rishonim like the Rif and the Rambam. He understands the Rif and the Rambam that it has to be from the time of harvesting. And the Abi Halacha is of the opinion that Chatchila we should be machon because of the chodosh. But if you don't have anything else, like Lo Yaleinu during the Holocaust, they didn't have anything else during the war, you can be yoitz with matzah that you watched from the time of either grinding, and even if only from the time of mixing. Mechaber adds. So Mechaber adds, in the Shazat Chag you can eat kemach, take kemach from the marketplace. It means from a goy, even from a goy. You don't say there's an instant something we don't find a chash chimutz. Mishnah Berurah adds, "Sheshima achita mishas tchino." You need to have it watching the chita mishas tchino, because from the time of grinding them, you bring them close to water. Because in their days, they had water mills. That was what a water mill did. According to this, Sha'atzin, where they do it with a water, with a windmill, that you find in Europe, certainly in Holland, or in a hand grinder, you don't need shmir mishas tchina. Only if they wash the grains, because usually they wash the grains in water, and it's enough to take the flour if they didn't wash it from somebody from that point on from flour. Now, most kilos of Yisrael who are careful about taking matzah l'kiyum mitzvahs matzah, whether in Eretz Yisrael it's one night or Chutz La'aretz 2 nights, and the rest of the Chag, only the matzah shmur, because they're machmer that it should be the only matzah that's kosher for Pesach or is allowed to be eaten is from the time of harvesting. Halacha brings that the grower was machmer to eat on Pesach only matzah shmur from the time of harvesting. Maybe water came on them when they were still attached to the ground. They were finished afterwards. Furthermore, we find in Shulchan Aruch, you do not mix matzah, not in any way, only through a Jew, not through a shiur shlit v'kot. Mishnah Berurah cites that it says ushmadem is hamatzos, that you have to be mechaven in the watching for them l'shem matzahs mitzvah. However, a goy or a cherish or a shlit or a cotton can't have the intent. Many poskim agree that even if a Jew stands there and he's doing l'shem matzahs mitzvah, right? Still, it doesn't help. He's not yotzim b'diavad like the Maggid Mishnah. And those are a mekel when a Jew's standing there, because the matzah is being made with the thought of a Jew in it. The thought doesn't enter something. That b'diavad is kosher b'diavad. Of course, it's not the best way of doing it. The Bach and the Machon Nesher is saying you can rely on them even only when there's no other way of making the matzahs.
Yisrael Val Yeroah b'dogin that went into the Noah. Dogin that went into the Noah before Pesach, water fell on it, just like it's forbidden to eat, the Rambam says, because it became Chometz, so it's also to keep it on Pesach, like every Chometz. But he has to sell it to Yisrael, and he has to tell him it fell on the water in order he should eat it before Pesach. And if he sells it to Anochi before Pesach, he says a little bit to each one, so that it will all be consumed by the goyim before Pesach, because we're afraid maybe the goyim will sell it to another Yisrael, and the Yisrael will know it's Chometz and keep it on Pesach. The Maggid Mishnah cites the Gemara in Sochim. There was a 40b, the ship that sank and before Pesach. And Rava said you could sell it to a goy. They ask why aren't we fearful that the goy will sell it to a Jew? In our Giyasa we find that he should say it a little bit only to Yisrael, according to our text, so that it'll be finished before Pesach. The Maggid Mishnah says the Rambam does not say he should sell it to. It did not have a text that said it should sell it to a Jew, but Rava permitted to sell it to anyone. And the kavanah is to sell it to a goy. Why does it have to be a little bit at a time? So it'll end before Pesach. And what he writes, that he could sell it all to a Jew, and he should let him know that it was in the ocean, that's understood, that's simple, understood. He doesn't have to mention the Gemara. The Baal Yitor had a text, he should sell it a little bit to a Jew, and it would seem, the Baal Yitor says, why should the text be Jew? It could be even to a Goy. The Tur writes that wheat that came in a boat that sank should sell it to Yisrael a little bit, so you can eat it before Pesach. And he cites the Baal Yitor that even without telling Yisrael that this dogan is Chometz, He can sell a little bit because it's going to be consumed. He can assume it's going to be consumed before Pesach. The Torah ends. The Rambam writes that he has to let him know. But the logic would seem to be like the Bali too, because you can sell any Jew before Pesach. Like somebody walks into the store, wants to buy something, you can't tell him, wait a minute, it's Chometz, get rid of it before Pesach. It's not our job to watch each other. Because the Mishnah asks a question, why they question the Rambam's statement that you can sell to a goy. He says even any grain you can sell to a Jew if he tells him, and therefore certainly it says in the Gemara he sells a small amounts of a calf to Yisrael. It's a mistake in the text, even to a goy. The question is, maybe the goy will sell it to a Jew. However, therefore recanted and said we should not sell it all to a goy before Pesach, just a little bit at a time, a little at a time. Therefore, according to the Kesef Mishnah, there's no machlokes between the Itur to the Rambam. Because also, even according to the Rambam, if he would sell it to Yisrael, he can sell it to everything with a condition that he make it known. Because if he won't make it known, he will cause him to be transgress on Pesach, because he doesn't know it's Chometz. And we'll turn the page. According to everyone, you can sell to a goy, a little bit like the Rambam. And this is the din according to Balai Yitur. The Balai Yitur has in his text to Yisrael. The Torah understood that when you sell a little bit, you do not have to let him be known to Yisrael because he will eat it before Pesach. And the Torah says that this is the rule if you sell to a Jew a little bit, but certainly you can sell a lot to a Jew, but then you have to tell him that this is Chometz shiur. The Mishnah explains that the Rambam, the Balei Itur, disagree. According to the Rambam, if you tell a Yisrael, you can sell it to him. But when he doesn't tell him, you can't sell him even a little bit, because we're afraid it'll remain by the Yisrael that bought it, and he'll eat it after Pesach. Therefore, he has to make it known. When he makes it known, he can sell it to him even a lot. But to a goy, you can only sell a little bit, because because then we have a double problem. Maybe the goy will sell it further, because regarding that is also the doubt, who says he's going to sell it to Yisrael even if he sells it further? And even if he sells it to Yisrael, who says the Yisrael will have anything left till Pesach? And therefore we don't go to that distant doubt or questionable situation. And according to the Lechem Mishnah, the Rambam is stringent. He says you can't sell even a little bit to a Jew without letting him know. The Balei Itur is makel that even to a goy, you can sell a little bit before Pesach. Only a little bit, but not a lot. HaMeir adds, you can't sell them kernels of grain, which did not burst. Because if it burst, obviously it's Chometz. HaMeir says that's okay by barley. But where it's soft and therefore it's Chometz. And since he sells it a lot, he can't get rid of all of it before Pesach. He has to let the Jew know. But if we're talking about wheat, we learned in Halacha Zayin that even though it got wet, as long as it didn't burst, there's no question of Chometz. Why can't he sell it to a Jew a lot at a time? Because the Jew will notice that it's Chometz. And he answers that since it went into the water in the ocean, it was a long time in the ocean, therefore we have a greater suspicion that it became Chometz. Furthermore, it could be that some of the chitim did burst, but you don't see them because they're in the bag. And who's going to go through every bag if it's a big amount? So he won't think that if you won't tell him it went into the water, he'll check the top and he'll see everything's okay. And then, therefore, when you sell to goyim, you sell a little bit. So you can't that anybody else who sees it will be able to see what he's purchasing. Rae Gann has a question. Let us be fear lest the goy buy a little bit and he'll mix it with other grain and sell it to a Jew. The answer is usually they don't do that. People don't buy one measure of chitim to mix it with a lot, and therefore we don't worry about that. So Racham didn't enact anything with that regard. And even if all the wheat became burst, and you see quickly that it's chometz, still you can't sell it to a goy only a little bit, because we're afraid he'll buy all the kernels, and when he'll understand what's going on here, that he can't send it to Jews because it's burst, he'll mix it there, or he'll make flour out of it, and they'll buy from him the flour, and the flour cannot be noted that it's from wheat that burst, and therefore, if it's only a small amount, we don't have to worry about it. Furthermore, he writes that you should tell a Jew that the chitim were taken from a vessel that sank in the river, and it became chometz. But a goy doesn't mention the Gemara. So where did Rambam get it from? He says the Rambam explained, understood, you should sell it a bit at a time to Yisrael only if you don't tell him what it is. Not like the Maggid Mishnah, that the Rambam had a different giyasa for goy, but he says no. Here we're talking about without telling him. The Rambam understood that you said a little bit at a time. And then it doesn't matter if you sell to a goy or to Yisrael, because he sells a little bit of it at a time. But you can sell even a lot to Yisrael if you let him know that this is grain that sank. We'll go to the next page in the Nor, and it became chometz, because then the purchaser will make sure that he'll tell it further to others. And if the lekeach is the purchaser is somebody who is strict in his religious beliefs, then he will let him know that you should eat it before Pesach. If you sell it to a goy, even if you tell it to him, he doesn't care. He'll sell it to a Jew for the very fact of seeing if the Jew will eat chometz on Pesach. Halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Paskins. If the wheat sank in the river or water came on it, it's just like it's also to eat it, so it's also to keep it. But rather you sell it to Yisrael and you tell him that you should eat it before Pesach. If he sells it to a non-Jew before Pesach, you can only sell a small amount. So that it will be consumed before Pesach, because we're fearful that the non-Jew will sell it to a Jew. The Mishnah Berurah cites that the Torah adds, this is only when he doesn't have chometz nikra. But the Mishnah Berurah says if you can tell it's chometz, meaning that the wheat or the barley burst, you can sell it to a Jew or to a goy. You don't have to worry that the guy will sell it to Yisrael and he'll eat it. Yisrael will eat it on Pesach because Yisrael will recognize its chometz. He cites the Ran is machmer because he's fearful that the goy will make it into flour, as we mentioned earlier, and therefore it will not be noticeable to the Jew. And the Mishnah Berurah concludes, according to our minhag, you don't buy kemach, the flour for Pesach, from the marketplace. Many later commentaries say there's no fear that the guy will sell it before Pesach, because you don't buy kemach for Pesach from the marketplace, and after Pesach it's okay. And if one has no choice but to take it from the guy, you can be makel and assume that it's not chometz. Machave continues, this grain that was in the ocean, in the river, or water fell on it, even though it did not crack open, it's forbidden. Because since it's sitting there, it usually wet wheat will begin to ferment. Is the first answer that we are more fearful when it stays a long time in water. So the Torah brings down the name of Ephraim, Rabbeinu Ephraim. The more adds, everyone should be careful that water like Shamim shouldn't fall on the wheat, because even if they did not burst, they are still forbidden.